Historians declare that the American Empire began with the Spanish-American War in 1898. It really began decades earlier, when the U.S. Navy formed the East India Squadron in 1835 that grew into the Asiatic Squadron in 1868. American warships deployed to Asia to intimidate and attack whoever interfered with American business interests. This force also established American colonies in China, Hawaii, and Samoa before the Spanish-American War. The first flag of the United States was copied from the British East India Company, the world's largest corporation that ruled British colonies in Asia. An American empire was always a goal of the wealthy seeking to become wealthier. Many immigrants from Britain arrived as contract workers for corporations designed to profit from colonial settlements, so Americans understood this system. America's first president, George Washington, stated that the United States was a, quote, nascent empire, and later an infant empire. In a 1785 letter to the mayor of New York, he called New York, quote, the seat of the empire, which resulted in its nickname, the Empire State. American whaling ships and trade ships were sailing in Asia and complained about pirates. Ships from the U.S. Navy sailed to Asia as early as 1831 to conduct punitive attacks against primitive groups who had killed American merchant sailors. Malays in Sumatra were bombarded and Fijians slaughtered to send a message. In 1838, the United States exploring expedition set sail to find potential colonies. This consisted of 7 U.S. Navy warships with scientists that cruised the world for 4 years. This expensive effort was partly research, but mostly a search for easy profits. U.S. Navy warships in Asia grew in number and worked with the British to protect Western business interests. In China, they helped establish and protect 4 small American colonies in China, called settlements. Thousands of U.S. Marines were stationed at these locations to protect American business interests. The U.S. Navy even formed a task force to patrol China's main internal trade route, called the Yangtze Patrol. These ships became involved in the British Opium Wars to protect American opium traders in Canton. Japan was wary of Western influence and would only trade with the Dutch, who had earned their trust. American Commodore Matthew Perry arrived in Japan with 4 warships and demanded that American traders be allowed to conduct business. He was turned away, so in 1854 he arrived with 8 warships, painted black, fired guns, and landed troops. Terrified Japanese rulers agreed to his demands and began to modernize its army for protection. All this occurred before American states existed along the Pacific coast and before a rail link was completed to the Pacific. These Navy warships sailed around Africa to reach the Pacific, and supporting them was a considerable cost. Navy warships patrolled Asian waters even during the American Civil War. In 1871, 5 U.S. Navy warships arrived in Korea to demand access for American traders. Korean rulers refused, so the Navy bombarded their forts and sent a large landing party ashore that killed hundreds. Tales of the American Empire has stories about all these incidents, linked below. In 1876, fighting broke out among Samoan factions about who was king. In 1878, the United States signed a treaty with one faction for the establishment of a naval station in Samoa. Americans sought to colonize the region, but this was dangerous as the powerful German Navy was in the area with the same goal. Fighting went on for years, with the United States supporting one Samoan group and the Germans another. Both provided arms to their faction and occasionally joined the fighting by providing naval gunfire support. This led to a standoff in 1889 between 3 American and 3 German warships in Apia Harbor. The threat of direct combat lingered for several months until a typhoon wrecked all 6 warships. 2 American ships were sunk and 1 grounded as 62 U.S. Navy sailors perished. New warships eventually arrived and major Samoan fighting erupted in 1898. The British joined the Americans in sending troops ashore. American Marines are seen here alongside Samoan allies. This led to several battles where over 100 Samoans perished. Several American sailors were killed, to include the leader of the expedition and his assistant, Ensign John Monaghan, pictured. This resulted in an agreement between colonial powers to divide Samoa. Germany took control of the larger western islands, and the United States took the eastern islands, which became known as American Samoa. The U.S. Navy built a naval station in Samoa, pictured. It closed in 1951, but Samoa remains an American colony. The U.S. Navy seized Hawaii in 1893, and it was formally annexed in 1898. The Spanish-American War allowed the United States an excuse to invade the Philippines, Cuba, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Historical textbooks pretend these American acquisitions were unintended. They suggest that after the Spanish Empire had collapsed, the United States became responsible for protecting these territories, so became an empire by accident. This is absurd. The United States had established colonies in Asia years before, and attacked Spain to add several more. U.S. Navy ships have flown the Navy Jack since 1775. Ships flying a rattlesnake flag warns everyone not to challenge their presence. By the end of World War II, the American Empire ruled the world, and U.S. Navy warships remained deployed worldwide to support Western business interests.
5 oceans, 7 continents. Whatever it takes, wherever it takes us. America's Navy, a global force for good.